The night the mail-order bride was abandoned, the wind howled across the Wyoming plains like it was mourning her fate, and she stood there clutching a single carpet bag, her fingers numb not just from the cold but from humiliation, because the family who had sold her away had already decided she was worthless, too plain, too quiet, too forgettable, to marry well, and the man who had ordered her sight, unseen, took one look at her face, beneath the station lantern, and muttered that she wasn't what he paid for, leaving her behind like spoiled goods while laughter echoed from the shadows. Her name was Clara Mayfield, and she had grown up being told that beauty was loud and sharp and sparkling, none of which she was, and when hunger crushed her family after her father's death, they sold her future to survive, promising her a rancher husband and safety, only to turn away when she begged not to be sent off like cattle. And now she stood alone until a horse stepped into the light, carrying a man whose presence silenced the night, a tall cowboy with weathered hands and eyes. Worn soft by solitude, Jonah Reed, the neighbor everyone knew but few truly understood. A man who lived in a quiet cabin near the ridge, avoided town gossip and carried grief like an old scar. Jonah had come only to pick up supplies but saw Clara standing there, trembling, her shoulders folded inward like she was trying to disappear, and something in him broke. Because he knew abandonment intimately, knew what it was like to be left behind when you weren't convenient anymore, and without asking for explanations or beauty or bargains, he tipped his hat and said simply, "You don't look like someone who deserves to be alone tonight." And when she looked at him, expecting judgment, she found none, only warmth. And when he offered her shelter, not ownership, not expectation, just a place to rest. She followed him because there was nowhere else to go. The cabin was small, humble, smelling of pine and coffee, and Jonah gave her his own bed while he slept near the fire. And for the first time since she'd been sold, Clara cried without fear. Not because of pain, but because someone had seen her as human again. And over the following day, she learned Jonah was a rancher with growing wealth but a heart cautious from losing his wife. Years ago. While Jonah learned Clara was strong in ways no mirror could show, waking before dawn to help, mending clothes, cooking with quiet care, listening without interrupting. And though the world had labeled her too plain, Jonah noticed how the light softened when it touched her face, how her kindness filled the cabin like warmth from a stove, and how every night she thanked him as if he had given her a kingdom instead of a roof. Rumors crept through town, whispers about the abandoned bride living with a lonely rancher. But Jonah didn't care, because every time Clara smiled shyly at him, something he thought long dead stirred again, and as winter pressed in, he realized he didn't just want to protect her, he wanted her to stay, not out of pity, but because his heart had chosen her before his mind could catch up. And if you've ever wondered whether kindness can change destiny, or whether love can see what the world refuses to, stay with this story. Because what happened next proved that sometimes the face worth loving forever is the one everyone else was blind enough to reject when spring finally broke the ice on the plains. It also shattered the walls Jonah had built around his heart. Because the more time passed, the more impossible it became to imagine the cabin without Clara's presence, her quiet humming while she worked, the way she sat by the window at dusk as if afraid. Happiness might vanish if she moved too fast. And when word reached town that Jonah Reed was one of the richest ranchers in the county, Clara's past came knocking in the cruelest way. Her family arrived uninvited, dressed in false smiles and excuses, suddenly remembering the daughter they had sold, praising her usefulness now that wealth surrounded her. And when they called her plain again, this time gently, as if it were still true, Jonah stepped forward, his voice steady but sharp, and told them the truth they never expected to hear. That Clara was the finest woman he had ever known, that her strength had rebuilt his home and his heart, and that wealth meant nothing compared to the way she looked at him like he mattered. Clara trembled as her family demanded she return with them, insisting Jonah had only taken her out of convenience. But Jonah did something no one had ever done for her before. He asked her what she wanted, not what she owed, not what she should do, and with tears streaking her face, Clara chose the man who had given her dignity instead of a price tag. And that night, under a sky bursting with stars, Jonah confessed that he loved her not despite her quietness, but because of it, because she had filled the silence he once feared. And when he asked her to stay as his wife, not his rescue, she said yes with a smile so radiant it erased every cruel word ever spoken about her. Their wedding was small, honest, and real, attended by people who had once doubted but now watched in awe as Jonah looked at Clara like she was the only woman in the world, and years later, when prosperity flourished and laughter echoed through the once lonely cabin, people would whisper not about how rich Jonah was, but about how deeply he loved his wife, the woman others had sold for being too plain. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that real love doesn't measure worth by appearances or price, then let it remind you too that the right heart will always recognize your value even when the world refuses to, so stay with us. Like the story, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to believe that being overlooked doesn't mean being unlovable, because sometimes the greatest love begins the moment someone finally sees you. Happiness, Clara learned, did not arrive loudly, but it tested itself fiercely. And the first real test came the summer, after the wedding, when drought scorched the land and whispers spread that Jonah Reed's fortune was built on luck that was finally running out. Because crops failed, cattle weakened, and men who once respected him began circling like vultures, offering to buy his land cheap while pretending concern. And through it all, Clara watched Jonah carry the weight in silence, his shoulders tighter each night, his smile slower to appear, until one evening she heard him mutter that maybe the world had been right all along, that maybe he was foolish to believe happiness could last. And it was then Clara realized love was not only about being saved, but about standing firm when storms came, because she did not shrink or retreat the way people expected a plain woman to do. Instead, she rose before dawn, learned accounts, negotiated with suppliers, sold handcrafted goods in town, and quietly rebuilt the ranch, piece by piece, while Jonah watched in stunned disbelief as the woman the world discarded became the backbone of everything he had. And when a wealthy land baron finally confronted Jonah, mocking him for marrying a woman with no beauty, no pedigree, and no worth, Clara stepped forward, calm and unshaken, and said that beauty fades, pride rots, but loyalty endures. And Jonah felt something inside him break open, because he understood then that Clara was not merely his love, she was his equal, his strength, his future. And when rain finally returned to the plains, soaking the land like forgiveness, Jonah took Clara's hands and promised her something greater than wealth or protection, partnership. And years passed with children's laughter filling the cabin, with Clara teaching her daughters that quiet does not mean weak, and Jonah teaching his sons that love is measured by respect, not possession. And one autumn evening, as they watched the sun sink behind the hills, Jonah kissed Clara's weathered hands and told her the truth he had known since the night he met her. He never rescued her. She rescued him. And if you are watching this story wondering whether your worth is invisible, whether being overlooked means being forgotten, remember, Clara, remember that the world often fails to recognize diamonds without shine. And if this story touched you, stay with us, like, subscribe, and share it. Because somewhere out there is a heart that will see you exactly as you are and choose you forever.